Alright guys, so in this video we want to talk about a price floor, right? A binding price floor. So let's suppose that we have the same market from before. We have a market for tacos, just so we have some good in reference. And we're given our quantity demand and quantity supply equations. We have 60 minus 10p, and we have 40 plus 10p, right? And I've gone ahead and graphed both of these. And here is our equilibrium price for tacos. It's $1. And the equilibrium quantity bought and sold in competitive equilibrium will be 50. Okay, so now let's suppose that the government interferes and places a price floor. Okay, so let's recall what a price floor is. Remember, a price floor is the legally determined minimum price that can be received for a product. Okay, so it's going to be the minimum price that consumers have to pay and that producers will receive for a product, in this case tacos. Okay, so let's think about what a non-binding price floor would look like, right? Non-binding meaning it doesn't have any effect on the market. Our equilibrium is not going to change. So let's say that the government says that, okay, the minimum price that we have to sell tacos at is 50 cents, okay? So here's our equilibrium. Well, 50 cents would probably be somewhere down here, right? So this is what our price floor would look like. I want to denote this as PF, okay? So if we have a price floor of 50 cents, remember, this is going to be a non-binding price floor, right? And the reason for that is because the government is saying the minimum price, right? The minimum price that we can sell tacos at has to be 50 cents or more. Well, where is our equilibrium? We're at $1, right? We're already at $1, so we're already legally above the minimum price. And because we're already at this price, no one is going to do anything, right? Like there's not going to be any shift in our market, right? Because what the government is saying is our price has to be somewhere up here, okay? It has to be somewhere up here. It has to be above the 50 cents or at 50 cents, okay? But because we're already at $1, nothing's going to happen, right? So that's going to be a non-binding price floor. But now let's suppose that the government places a different kind of price floor, right? So the government is now saying that instead of 50 cents, the minimum price of tacos is now $1.50, right? So let me denote this in purple here, 1.5 denoting $1.50, and this is going to be our PF, our price floor, okay? So now notice what happens. Now the price floor is at $1.50. Well, our price that's being currently charged, right, the market price for tacos is only $1, right? And what the government is saying is that we have to charge a minimum of $1.50. So we have to be at $1.50 or more, right? We have to be somewhere up here or at $1.50, right? We have to be at that level. Well, as of now, we're not, right? As of now, this is not a legal price. So what's going to happen is not the government, but the market is going to shift. So the market is now going to shift from price of $1 to $1.50, right? People were kind of happy before. They were purchasing, people who were able to purchase tacos at $1 were purchasing tacos, and the firms who were able to supply tacos for $1 were now supplying tacos for that price, right? But now, because the price has changed, now we're moving upwards, right? Now our equilibrium is actually shifting. Okay, so the next step is figuring out what the new equilibrium is going to look like, right? So we know that the price floor shifts our price up, right? Now this is a binding price floor. This is now a binding price floor, and we have to recall what that means. Remember, binding means that it's affecting our market, right? It's going to change our equilibrium, right? So let's ask ourselves now, what happens to the new quantity supplied and the new quantity demanded, okay? And what that's going to mean for inefficiency. So let's recall the law of demand and law of supply like we did for price ceilings. Well, the law of demand tells us that as the price increases, the quantity demanded is going to decrease. So now let's look at the intersection of the price floor. Right, here's our price floor and the quantity demanded. Okay, whoops, that was not a very good trace. So let's do it like that. Okay, they're intersecting right here. Okay, so what we're seeing is we're seeing the quantity demanded, right? This is the new quantity demanded, all right? And it's actually decreasing because it's to the left of our original equilibrium, right? And this is in sync with what we know. If the price goes up, the quantity demanded is going to decrease, right? Because there's a negative relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. Now let's see what happens to supply, right? So because the price is increasing, the law of supply tells us that as the price increases, the quantity supplied is going to also increase, right? Because there's a positive relationship between the price and the quantity supplied. So our price floor intersects our supply at this point right here, right? So what we have is this new, I'm going to call this QS new. So this is our new quantity supplied, right, on the x-axis. So we need to figure out what this value is here, right? We need to figure out this value, and we need to figure out this value down here. Okay. Well, to figure this value out, right, we already have our equations, so why don't we just plug in $1.50 into our quantity demanded, right? So we want to plug in $1.50 into our quantity demand and into our quantity supplied for price, right? Because what we're plugging in for is the price. So let's go ahead and find the quantity supplied. So we're going to get 40 plus 10 times $1.50. So that's going to give us a new quantity supplied of 55, right? And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to plug in $1.50 this time for quantity demand, but for the price, okay? So we're seeing 60 minus 10 times $1.50. Okay, and we're getting a new quantity demanded of 45. Okay, and we know that we're doing this correctly because this is in sync with our intuition. It's in sync with what is happening graphically, and now numerically that's exactly what's happening, right? Our quantity demanded is now less than what it was in the equilibrium. We're going from 50 tacos bought by consumers to 45 bought, right? So the quantity demanded has now decreased by 5 because the price has gone up, right? And same thing happens with quantity supplied, right? Numerically, it checks out. We were at 50 tacos sold in equilibrium, but now we're going to the right. Right now, firms want to supply more tacos. Okay, so check out what happens. Now our supply is actually greater than our demand. Right? And because our supply is greater than our demand, we learned that this phenomenon is called a surplus. Right now we now have too many tacos to go around. Right, we now have too many tacos to go around, whereas in a binding price ceiling we had too few tacos. Right, what was happening is that we had a shortage, but in this case we have a surplus, and the size of this surplus, right, is just a difference between our new quantity supplied and new quantity demanded values. Right, so we have 55 tacos going around, but only 45 of those tacos are being bought. Right, so we have 10 extra tacos, so the size of our surplus is 10 tacos. Okay, so the size of our surplus is going to be 10 tacos. Okay. All right, great. So we just calculated our, this is essentially our new equilibrium. We calculated what the surplus looks like. Now what we want to do is we want to figure out a measure of the inefficiency that is created by this price floor. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at surplus, right? So just like before, we're going to be looking at surplus. So when we were in equilibrium, right, when we were in equilibrium at this point, right, when the initial intersection of supply and demand, our consumer surplus was this triangle, right, the area of this triangle, and our producer surplus was the area of this triangle, right? And we know how to calculate that, 1/2 base times height. But now what's happening is now there are many consumers who are dropping out of the market, right? And again, this has to do with their willingness to pay, right? These consumers up here, well, they can still afford these tacos, right? Because their willingness to pay is above $1.50, right? Whereas these consumers right here, they are dropping out, right? So they're going to drop out of the market. They're no longer buying tacos, okay? At least not in this market, okay? So only this many tacos are demanded. Only this many tacos are demanded. So what happens is these consumers, they are not buying tacos anymore, right? And because they're not buying tacos anymore, but they did in equilibrium, these are the consumers that we have lost, right? Because the folk down here, they were never in our market to begin with, even in equilibrium, right? Because their willingness to pay was too low, right? It was too low for the market price, because the market price was $1, right? So these folk, they were never in the market or participating in the market to begin with, but these individuals were, right? And because they were, but they no longer are because of the price floor, we would say that they are dropping out. Okay, so let's use yellow to denote the loss on the consumer side, right? So the loss on the consumer side is this this yellow line that I'm shading over the our demand curve, right? So these consumers are no longer participating in the market. Okay, so let me just bracket that and write. I'm just going to write dropping out. All right, well, what's true about the supply side, right? We know that these consumers drop out. Well, because the price has gone up, now all of these suppliers want to sell, right? All the way from this point to here. All of these suppliers now want to sell these tacos, right? But how many of them can actually sell? Well, if the demand is only 45, right, then the amount of tacos that can be sold are from here to here, right? Because if the demand is only 45, well, we have 10 tacos left over, right? Because not all of these suppliers are going to get to sell their tacos, right? So from this point to this point, these suppliers, they don't get to sell, right? Even though they want to sell, they don't get to sell, right? So we're only going to see 45 firms, or, you know, that's assuming that each firm is making a taco. Only this amount of producers are going to be able to sell, okay? So what's our loss on the supply side? Well, our loss would be from this point, sorry, let me redraw that. It would be from this point to this point, right? Our loss is from here to here, because these are the producers that we are losing from equilibrium, right? Because these people over here, these firms were not participating when we were in our equilibrium to begin with, right? Because the price went up, they now want to join they now want to join the market. They now want to participate in the market transaction, right, for tacos. But only this many suppliers can, right? Because the demand for tacos has now fallen. Okay, and these folk who were actually participating in the market before in equilibrium, they no longer can. Okay, so this is our loss on the supply side. And notice that this essentially makes the area of two triangles that forms one triangle, right? Just like before, right? We have two triangles that make one big triangle. This is our loss. This is our loss on the consumer side, right? This is our loss on the consumer side. And this down here is our loss on the producer side, okay? That's our loss on the producer side. So if you were asked to figure out, okay, what's the loss on consumer, what's the loss on producer, you would just take the total surpluses before and subtract off what is being lost, right? But right now we just want to focus on the deadweight loss. Okay, so the area of both of these triangles put together, that's going to give us our total deadweight loss. Okay, that's going to give us our total deadweight loss in this market because of this binding price floor, right? So just like before, what we want to do is we want to figure out the area of this big triangle. Well, we know the area of the triangle is just 1/2 base times height, right? So now we just have to look at this graphically and figure out what the base and the height are going to be. Okay, well, remember what I said. The base is going to be usually the simplest part, right? The base is just from this point to this point. And if we're thinking about base, we want to look at it horizontally. All right, so think about it horizontally. So we're looking at it from x value to x value. Well, the corresponding x value here is 45. The corresponding x value here is 50, right? So our base is just the difference between 50 and 45. Okay, so our base is going to be 50 minus 45. So our base is 5. Okay. Now let's figure out the height. Okay. So we now want to figure out the height. Well, remember what I said. The height we're going to be looking at vertically. So think of it in terms of y, right? The y value, which is our price. So the height of this triangle is from this point to this point, right? That's our height. Okay, and this was our base, but this is our height. Okay, right there. So to figure this out, we actually know one of the points, right? So we have $1.50 corresponding to this y value, but we want to know what this is going to be, right? We want to know what this price value is going to be, so we can figure out our price, right? So we can figure out our height, right? So we want to find this value so we can figure out the height of this triangle. So that's going to be the final piece of this puzzle, is figuring out what value is going to go here, right? So we want to figure out what value is going to go here. So just write a question mark there. Well, let's take a look at what quantity we have, right? We have a quantity of 45 tacos here, right? And that's, if you were to take this value, right, just get x equals 45 and just intersect that with supply, right? Similar to what we did in the price ceiling problem, we would find that we would get our corresponding y value here, right? So really all we have to do is plug 45 into our quantity supplied. Okay, so we're gonna, we're gonna plug 45 into our quantity supplied right here. I was looking at the wrong variable. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna solve for the price. Okay, so we're gonna solve for the price. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna plug in 45 for the quantity supplied. And now all I have to do is solve for the price, right? So I now have 5 equals to 10p, right? So it seems like here it's going to come out to be price is equal to 0.5, right? Or 1/2. So our corresponding y value that we were trying to solve for here is just 0.5. Okay. So now we're able to take the height, right? Our height is from this value to this value. Again, it's going to be the difference between $1.50 and 50 cents. Okay, so our height is 1.50 minus 0.50. That just comes out to be $1. Okay, so now we figured out our base. Now we figured out our height. So let's finally plug all this into our formula. So we're going to get 1/2 base, which is 5, times our height, which is $1. Okay, and this comes out to be 250 times 1. So we're just going to get a deadweight loss of $2.50. Okay, so this market is going to have a deadweight loss of $2.50. Okay, so that's how we calculate deadweight loss. It's very similar to the price ceiling problem as it is in the price floor problem, right? And in both cases, we have a binding price ceiling and a binding price floor, as we just solved for here. And remember, what binding tells us is that it's going to change our equilibrium, right? It's going to have some sort of effect on our market, and it's going to create inefficiency as well. And the measure that we're using for inefficiency is this deadweight loss. Okay, so it's really important that we know how to calculate the area of this triangle, right? And because we already learned in chapter 3 how to calculate consumer and producer surplus, we'll know what effect that has on the consumer and producer surplus as well. Okay, so how much that's reduced by. So yeah, that's about it. And in the next video, we'll talk about taxes.